Thank you, and thank you all for inviting me to share a few thoughts with you this morning. I will say two things, essentially. The first is my very strong commitment to putting a proper price on carbon. One of the things that I did when I got to the Senate was to establish a climate action task force where senators from different committees who cared about climate change could get together and strategize together. And we meet weekly. Recently, we had a meeting with the head of the National Science Foundation. And they are doing research on our ability to meet our Paris commitments and to meet the, frankly, planetary requirements for keeping our carbon pollution under control. She reported to us that it is their view that it is not practically realistic for us to meet our carbon targets without a price on carbon. That the economy-wide signal that a price on carbon sends is essential to succeeding at keeping our planet within the ranges of temperature, acidity, and carbon level that has characterized our entire human development. And obviously we're outside of that now and we need to move back in. So I am very passionately committed to getting a price established on carbon. In doing so, I am aligning with the Republicans who have thought climate change through to a solution, because virtually every Republican who has thought climate change through to a solution has come to the same place, which is a revenue-neutral price on carbon. If you go to economists, a price on carbon is the theoretically correct economic way to address this problem. Conservative and liberal economists alike agree on that proposition. So whether you approach this question from a point of view of what is the correct theoretical economic solution, or whether you approach it from what is the solution that a group of Republicans is likely to accept, or whether you approach it from what is necessary from a practical point of view to meet our targets, the arrows point all towards a proper price on carbon. What are we talking about? Well, if you take the price on carbon that has been set by the administration through the Office of Management and Budget, and you multiply it by the amount of emissions that we emit, you get a reasonably good proxy number for what the cost is that the fossil fuel industry is imposing on the rest of us, and that does not go into the price of their product, and therefore gives them an advantage, a subsidy, against wind, against solar, against geothermal, against other forms of energy. The Office of Management and Budget social cost of carbon, they call it, has now been upheld by at least 2 federal courts. So it has some pretty good solid underpinnings to it. And when you do the multiplication, the number you get is above $200 billion per year. There's a group called the International Monetary Fund. They're a fairly intelligent group of human beings. They have no known conflict of interest when it comes to carbon pollution and climate change. And they've done their own analysis of what they call effective subsidy to fossil fuel is in the United States. My calculation, the kind of rough calculation, takes you to $200 billion. Their more complex calculation takes you to $700 billion per year. So if you're the fossil fuel industry, you are floating on a subsidy of cost that you have exported to the public that is not in the price of your product, and that gives you advantage against renewable and clean energy to the tune of $200 billion to $700 billion per year. So that's a very big, what did they call it in Star Wars, a disturbance in the force, right? That's a very big disturbance in the economic force. And I can tell you from Washington that the fossil fuel industry is fighting relentlessly to protect that. When you read in the newspaper about oil company CEOs who say climate change is real and we support a price on carbon, don't believe it. They say that for public consumption, but I can assure you, living in Congress, that the folks who they send to Congress to be their enforcers are 100% opposed to that stuff that they're saying for public consumption at the CEO level. It may be happy talk in the captain's cabin, but down on the gun decks, they're still after anybody who dares cross them to protect that $200 billion to $700 billion subsidy. So we're in a very, very important fight. And I think the way the public is moving on this, the fact that the CEOs had to fess up that climate change is real and that they support a carbon price, even though they really don't, they at least had to say that. That's pressure, that's reality, that's the public. That's not being able to get through a cocktail party at Davos without being scorned by your CEO peers if you don't greenwash yourself a little bit. So even that is actually a good sign. Somebody once said that hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays to virtue. So at least they feel the need for a little tribute to climate virtue, which they didn't before. So that's progress. That was point one, how we are structured to try to solve the carbon problem in the US Congress and what I think the result should be. The second takes me to the area where you all work, which is what the food industry, what agriculture and our food supply have to do with this. Because as you know, the bulk of the conflict has been directly with the fossil fuel producers, coal, oil, natural gas, and so forth. We haven't focused as much on agriculture, and yet agriculture is a very strong producer of carbon pollution. And it's a particularly strong producer of methane pollution in ways that we need not get into the details of. A carbon fee will help there as well, although it is harder to find a way to price naturally released methane from stockyards compared to importing of fuels, extracting of fuels, and so forth. So what we need to do is to focus on this issue in the next farm bill. In my world, we do farm bills about every 5 years. We did one 2.5, 3 years ago, so there's another one coming up in the next administration. The way they work is that they come out of the Agriculture Committee. Who wants to go onto the Ag Committee in the Senate? People from farm states, Farm Belt folks. So you start with a self-selected group of people writing that bill who have a very powerful interest in supporting the agriculture industry rather than in doing good things. It is not a cross-section of the Senate. It is a self-selected group of people who are very keen to support agriculture. So for those of us who are not on the Agriculture Committee but who see its effects, it's important for us to be ready in advance. What you don't want is a bill to come out of committee with a lot of momentum, have it be bipartisan, which it would be if it came out of committee with a lot of momentum, and have one side or the other get rolled because the bill has momentum, you throw up a few amendments, you get agreement from the committee members to vote them down, to stand together, and you get to 60, and boom, you've got a new ag bill. It's important that we plan in advance to avoid that scenario. So one of the things that I pledge to you is that I will work with my colleagues through the Climate Action Task Force and otherwise to begin the process of preparing basically what the test should be for a good ag bill when the next one comes up. Not just one driven by big agriculture, but one that a broad spectrum of the Senate takes an interest in. So we're going to start that process through the Climate Action Task Force. It's now close enough that it's probably worth beginning to prepare for it. It's just a couple years out now. You need time to prepare in advance. And it would be very helpful for me to hear from you what recommendations would be best for us to keep in mind as we prepare whatever our countermeasures are to what could be a powerful industry train piling through. Now, we did get some very good things in the last agriculture bill. It was not a complete rollover. It's been probably the best agriculture bill from a conservation perspective anybody had ever seen. But in an agriculture bill, to say that good things have happened is working off a very low bar. And it's our task to keep raising that bar and to make sure that in our agricultural sector, we are meeting not just the nutritional needs of this country, but also the survivability needs of the conditions under which our planet operates and the environmental needs of people who actually go out into the natural environment, either to hunt or fish or farm or simply enjoy recreation and walking and the pastimes of past generations. So thank you for inviting me. Those were my two topics that I wanted to leave you with. I commend you on your conference and hope that in the years ahead we can work towards a successful next agriculture bill. Thank you very much.